Has been a busy 3-week stretch for Kendall Rogers. Conference tournaments, the regional round, the super regional round, and now he heads to Omaha, Nebraska for the 2024 College World Series. Good afternoon, my friend.
Good to talk to you, man. How are you?
Have you made it to Omaha yet, or do you travel tomorrow?
I have. I've just gotten here, and as you might imagine, I'm tracking down some scoop on the coaching front. So we'll see how that percolates.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. The last time we talked, you said, I feel like we missed a topic, so let's start there. We'll get to the College World Series in just a second. That was the announcement after the SEC tournament was over that Mike Bianco would be back, and also kind of reshaping his staff, and we found out that Ole Miss is going to be hiring a pitching coach, and Mike Bianco is going to return to kind of turn all of those responsibilities over to that new pitching coach.
Yeah, I think that's smart. You know, it's kind of funny. You know, I talked to Kevin O'Sullivan about this a few years ago because Sully in his own right is a pitching coach as well. And, you know, he brought in David Kopp to kind of handle their pitching because he said, hey, here's the deal. Like, I love working with my pitchers, but sometimes as a head coach, you got to kind of take your hands off a little bit and kind of just run the overall aspects of the program as opposed to just worrying about the pitching staff. And I think from Mike's standpoint, I think he probably felt like for the betterment of that program that he needs to hire someone who can kind of take on a stronger role with that pitching staff. So, you know, on one hand, I get that Ole Miss fans are probably a little perturbed that they're keeping Mike Bianco another year. But, you know, two things here. One, this is a guy that just won the national championship 2 years ago. Two, look no further than Starkville on how quick things can change. I mean, Chris Lemonis was fired by every Mississippi State fan in the middle of February. At the end of the year, I mean, they were, you know, arguably a top 16 type of seed. They could have very easily hosted, probably should have hosted. So it's one of those things, I think if you're Ole Miss, I think you look at next year and say, hey, you know what? If we're not good next year, like, we need to figure something out, you know, wholesale-wise. And so I'm fine with them keeping him another year. I think it makes sense, especially when we look at what happened with State in the offseason. But he's going to have to make a really good pitching coach hire because at the end of the day, the standard at Ole Miss at this point has been raised. Like, this is a program that, as difficult as it can be in the SEC sometimes, like, it should not be in the position that it has been in the last 2 years.
Yeah, I think everybody agrees on that point. What do you make of the announcement out of South Carolina officially yesterday of Paul Mainieri returning to college baseball after being out for a couple of years? They're going to pay him a lot of money. They're paying his staff a lot of money. I think that one caught some people by surprise.
It caught me by surprise. I'll be very honest with you. I was called about that one about 4 or 5 days ago, and I'm not being disrespectful, I promise. But, like, I kind of laughed. I'm like, yeah, okay, like, yeah, get real. Like, that's not happening. And it happened. And, you know, the thing about Paul is he clearly, and this is a good thing for his health, but, like, he clearly is in a much better place. At one point, when he stepped out from LSU, he's having a lot of neck issues. He could barely stand being in the dugout, all day, all night long during a game. And so clearly he's feeling a lot better. The issue that I have with this is you're overpaying every one of your coaching staff. Like, Terry Rooney made half of what he's going to make at South Carolina at LSU. Paul Mainieri would have walked to Columbia to get another SEC job, and yet you pay him $1.3 million. And then you got Monty Lee, who, you know, I love Monty, and I've known him forever, and he's a good assistant, but you're paying the dude $550,000 a year on a 3-year deal. So what it looks like to me is that they hire Paul Mainieri, but they're essentially telling everyone that Monty Lee will end up running this program in a couple of years. I just think they overpaid. I like Paul. I think Paul certainly has a championship pedigree. There's no question about that. They're going to have a well-run program, but there's also no question to me that Ray Tanner overpaid for pretty much all of these guys.
Yeah. That's pretty much the reaction that we had to it yesterday. And, like, the only thing that I could come up with was that Ray Tanner decided this is our guy, and that's what it took him to convince Paul Mainieri to come out of retirement. I mean, that's the only logical way I could make it make sense.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I know Ray has a really good relationship with Paul, but there's a difference between being buddies and being your next head baseball coach. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it may work out great, but I just wonder in this NIL era, South Carolina is already under the 8 ball in terms of NIL money, and you're going to throw a guy in there that's 60-plus years old who doesn't have – you remember, Maneri retired before NIL was a thing.
That's
so you've
right.
got a guy that has never dealt with NIL, who's 60-plus years old, who also is kind of bouncing back from some neck and, health issues. I don't know. Maybe it works out, but there's certainly a ton of uncertainty, and uncertainty in the program in the SEC can sometimes be a recipe for disaster.
Kendall, I feel like the last 2 weekends have been just spectacular for college baseball. When you look at the excitement that existed in the regional round with the matchups, and I know there were some blowouts in some super regional games, but on the whole, I thought the super regionals were really good. I guess you could argue that maybe all ACC and SEC teams in the College World Series is not great for the health of the game overall, but it's representative of the places that care about college baseball. I know that.
Yeah, here's the thing about that argument, right? That people are like, oh, well, this is terrible for baseball. I mean, is it? I mean, these SEC and ACC teams beat these West Coast teams, beat the Northern teams, beat the Southwestern teams fair and square to move on. I mean, Florida went to Oklahoma State, beat Nebraska, beat Oklahoma State, beat Clemson, and I know Clemson's an ACC team, but my point is all these teams beat those other teams. So it's not like, Florida, A&M, and all these different programs just had it handed to them on a silver platter. Like A&M had to beat a Pac-12 team. Guess what? They beat a Pac-12 team. So on one hand, you could say, oh, well, we need more competitive balance. But, how are you going to create more competitive balance without essentially just giving somebody a charity bid through the tournament? So at the end of the day, these two conferences are the best two conferences in college baseball by a significant margin, and that's the storyline. I also think the storyline here for me is, the SEC is the best conference, no question about it. But the ACC, had a really good postseason, and they look really good. So I think the gap between the ACC and the SEC is closing just a little bit every single year right now.
So the way the bracket sets up, on the left side, we've got 3 ACC teams and Tennessee. On the right side of the bracket, 3 SEC teams and NC State. Which is more likely, that we get an all-SEC final or an all-ACC final?
I would go with all SEC. I just think if you look at the one side of Florida, A&M, and Kentucky, I like my chances of getting an SEC team out of there. Frankly, I think Florida and A&M winner, I think is the team that wins that bracket.
Oh, really?
I really do. I think
you're not buying Kentucky.
I do. I'm not saying I'm not buying them. I just think A&M is better than Kentucky, and I think Florida's sizzling hot right now. And by the way, this team played for a national championship in this ballpark a year ago. So that stuff matters, man. And, I look at Kentucky, and I like their personality. I think they have a business-like approach. But we say it every year, there's always that one team that come here and, they just kind of get caught up in the moment. You just kind of wonder, as emotional as Kentucky plays, do they get caught up in the moment a little bit? So I think the winner of the one bracket is the Florida A&M winner on Saturday. I think whoever wins that game will win that bracket, because the problem is, especially A&M, if A&M wins that, then you're going to have to beat Aschenbeck and Cortez in Game 2 to beat those guys and not have them be in the driver's seat. So I think if A&M is going to be beaten in the next week, it's going to have to be Saturday.
Looking at that left side of the bracket, and I know there's some recency bias here for me, that Virginia team under Brian O'Connor, I mean, I don't think anybody's picking them to win it all, but am I crazy for thinking that it would not be like an upset if they end up in the championship series with the way they're kind of balanced with their pitching really coming along over the last month?
Yes, that's the beautiful thing about this field. That's why I really like it, is that I don't think any of these teams winning it would really be an upset. Even NC State, is a team that, they're really offensive. Their bullpen's really good. Virginia, they've hit all year long. I mean, we've kind of wondered about their pitching for much of the year, but I mean, you've seen them. I mean, you look at those guys in the postseason, they've been really good on the mound for the most part. So, yeah, any of those teams like that, like Virginia, I think have a decent shot to win, to at least advance the championship series. And, the other team for me, somebody asked me this yesterday, out of each bracket, who's the team that you kind of feel like is the team of destiny? And, I talked about A&M. I think A&M's a team for me on the other. When you look at the home run that Caden Kent hit the other night, the fact that he replaced Braden Montgomery, and, the dude hits the grand slam to basically win the game. And, that kind of stuff right there is okay, these guys have all the mojo. And the other, North Carolina, I think when you look at North Carolina and just the big situations they've been in, the big situations they've delivered in, man, I like their feeling, man. I like their feeling. I think this is a team that knows, that thinks, knows, and just kind of wills their way to wins. And so I would keep an eye on North Carolina in that bracket too, even though I picked Tennessee.
Hey, 10 seconds left. Which fan base is going to travel the best out of these 8?
I'm going to surprise you. I'm going to go Kentucky. I'm going to say Kentucky shows out this weekend.
Kendall, thanks for your time. Enjoy the College World Series.
You got it, gentlemen.